tonight's Conversations with Great Minds, I'm joined by Dr. Neal Barnard. Dr. Barnard is a clinical researcher, author, and health advocate. He's been a principal investigator and co-investigator in many clinical trials investigating the effects of diet on health, including one study that looked at the effects of dietary interventions in type 2 diabetes patients. Dr. Barnard received his MD degree from the George Washington University School of Medicine. He's the author of several books, including the 21-Day Weight Loss Kickstart and Breaking the Food Seduction. Dr. Barnard joins me now in the studio, and also Dr. Neal Barnard's program for reversing diabetes. This is the one I find fascinating. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. What made you get into this? What drew you into diet? I mean, most physicians, it's, here's the pills.
Yeah. It is. I have to say, what I'm doing now is exactly the opposite of how I grew up. I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. Come from a long line of cattle ranchers, and every day of my life, roast beef, baked potatoes, and corn, right, except for special occasions when it was roast beef, baked potatoes, and peas. But what actually happened to me, the year before I went to medical school, I was working in a hospital as the autopsy assistant, and when somebody would die in the hospital, I would help in the examination of the body, and there was nothing like seeing atherosclerosis, the hardening of the arteries, and smelling it, and so forth. One day we had a person who died of a massive heart attack in the hospital, probably from eating hospital food, but it's another story. Anyway, we pulled the ribs off the chest to examine the heart, which was filled with atherosclerosis. At the end of the exam, I put the ribs back in the chest, sewed up the skin, and cleaned up, and I went up to the cafeteria where they were serving ribs for lunch.
Whoa.
And I started to connect what we eat with the diseases that we get. In some ways, it was almost an emotional connection, but as time went on, as I got my medical training, I realized it's the most important connection that we have. Because diabetes is not a deficiency of this drug or that drug. It's caused by food.
So did you go through a personal conversion before you went through a professional eureka, or did it go the other way around?
It took time, I have to say. For me, it took time. My father...
I'm assuming you eat the diet that you recommend.
I do now. Oh, yeah. Exactly the opposite growing up. But my father left the cattle business, and he was a physician, and he treated diabetes with medications and so forth. And I have to say, I think he was really frustrated because the disease never turned around. And so when I was in medical school, it was the last thing that I wanted to deal with, because diabetes is a one-way street to more and more complications. And to think that we now know how to really tackle this disease is a wonderful thing.
Well, and some of the, diabetes is type 2 diabetes, type 1 childhood diabetes, the inflammation of the pancreas, still theories, virus, who knows what, but type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset diabetes. Right. Increasingly now we're seeing this among kids. It's epidemic in the United States. Some of the complications are, diabetic retinopathy, blindness?
Blindness. It's the leading cause of blindness, leading cause of amputations because of the impaired circulation to the legs. So a leading contributor to kidney disease, so you end up on dialysis. And if you put it all together, people lose a decade easily of life or more.
For having type 2 diabetes? For
having type 2 diabetes. And it does not have to happen.
Right. So what is the mechanism? What is it that is causing people to have type 2 diabetes, and what can they do about it besides going to the doctor and saying, give me some of that, whatever the drug is?
Here's what it's not.
Some insulin.
When the doctor does a blood test, they say there's too much sugar in your blood, that's glucose, and so don't eat sugar.
Right.
And don't eat bread because that turns to sugar, and don't eat any other carbs like potatoes and pasta and so forth. And that's not the issue. That never was the issue. The problem has been shown now because we can look inside the cells in ways we couldn't before. And if you look inside the muscle cells in particular, they're filled with little particles of fat. Now, doctors hate words like fat. We call it intramyocellular lipid, but it's fat building up in the cells. And when that is there, insulin can't work. So the diet that NIH funded us to test was a diet that really just didn't have the fat in it. So no animal products. Vegetarian diet, because now there's zero animal fat.
It's actually a vegan diet. No dairy products as well. No eggs, no cheese, no milk.
That's right. No animal products at all. So there's no animal fat, and we keep the oils low. So the person who's taking that bottle of olive oil and going glug, 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 glug all over their salad, that fat gets into the body too. So we're really minimizing it, and what we see is the fat starts to drain out of the cells, the insulin starts working again. And we've seen people where their blood sugars come down and down and down into the normal range. Their need for medication diminishes. And don't get me wrong, I don't want people to fire their doctor and throw their medicines in the trash, because the process is gradual. But it's the most powerful program that we've ever seen, more powerful than any of the oral diabetes medications.
And how did you come to this? I mean, did you like put some patients on this diet? Did you try it yourself? I mean, tell me about the study. Tell me how you got here.
Well, the first one, there was a diabetes foundation in Virginia. They came to us and they said, they had been funding a lot of rat and mouse research, and they said, we're not getting anywhere with this for understandable reasons. And they said, we need to be studying human beings, and how do we do this? And I suggested diet studies, because if you look around the world, the people with the least diabetes live in Japan or rural China, where they're eating rice and they're eating vegetables, and the fast food chains haven't moved in. So we did our first study, and it was just dramatic to see how much people improved. So then NIH funded us in 2003 to really do a more definitive test, and people lose weight and their cholesterol is improved. We had one man who said, make sure you tell everybody that my erectile dysfunction went away. So we'll find reasons to reach a lot of people, but the bottom line is it really works.
Yeah, it's really quite remarkable. Let me move that. Well, actually, just to finish this, people on insulin, you know, they're told you're going to have to take this insulin for the rest of your life. That's no longer necessary?
If I could get to a person soon enough. What happens is, if their blood sugar has been persistently high, eventually the pancreas starts to run out of gas, and it has trouble producing the insulin year after year after year. So when a person has had diabetes for 20 or 30 years, the diet will improve it, but they may continue to need insulin. But if I can get to somebody at the time they're diagnosed, or in the first few years, the chances that they'll ever need insulin are really quite low. But I have to tell you, Tom, that what worries me the most is not the people that I see in research. It's their kids. Because kids today, according to the CDC, 1 in 3 kids is going to have diabetes in their lifetime. 100 million Americans now have pre-diabetes or diabetes. It's a time bomb. We're spending billions upon billions upon billions of dollars, and it's going to bankrupt us, but the personal cost is just incalculable.
Yeah. You're a pretty thin guy. It seems that there's an association between this vegan diet, basically, and people getting skinny.
Yeah.
Is there a direct correlation between weight and diabetes, and is that one of the things that ties us all together?
It's one of the things. That's right. When a person is able to avoid overweight, the likelihood of diabetes is low.
Right.
But when you study populations, if you look at meat eaters, semi-vegetarians, vegetarians, vegans, the vegans have very, very little risk of developing diabetes, and they're the skinniest people on the planet. I don't mean abnormally thin. I mean their BMI, their body mass index, right in the center of where they should be.
Yeah. Do you think that humans basically evolved to be basically fruit and vegetable eaters with the occasional, cockroach or a little bit of, insect or meat or something, but, as condiments? I mean, you talked about Japanese and rural Chinese. They eat meat, but they eat it as a condiment rather than as a staple.
I put that question to Richard Leakey, the paleoanthropologist, because if you look at the other great apes, they're not eating, meat, and they certainly don't eat dairy products.
Gorillas will occasionally eat an insect.
Yeah, exactly. So how did meat eating begin? And what he suggested to me was, it's true that human beings, if you look at our teeth, our digestive tracts, it all says herbivore. Right. So how did we become meat eaters? His explanation was that perhaps during a time when food was not widely available, maybe a drought, human beings began to scavenge. But that was really only practical when you had stone tools, so that you could cut the meat off of the bones that the lion had left behind. So it probably began with the Stone Age, and for whatever reason, it just sort of continued. And once we had fire, then it was something that people could
also, meat is concentrated. I mean, fat is concentrated calories.
It's concentrated calories. But to this day, if I have a person who comes in and they've got diabetes or weight problems or heart disease, they have a pre-Stone Age body. So if I feed them the vegetables and fruits and beans and simple plant-based foods, these disease processes reverse. Their arteries start opening up again.
What do you think about this hypothesis that was, I think I saw it in a New York Times article a couple of weeks ago, that Alzheimer's might be a form of diabetes?
I think it's true.
How?
I think it's true. Well, first of all, I should say that people are starting to get used to the idea that food affects your heart or your waistline. But the idea that it could affect your brain is a totally novel thing for many, many people. But back in 1993, there is a study in Chicago affiliated with Rush University. They brought in thousands of people, they tracked what they were eating, and it turned out that those people who had the most saturated fat, that's the fat in animal products, those who had the most saturated fat in their diet had 3 times the risk of Alzheimer's disease compared to other people. And the question is, wait a minute, we know it raises cholesterol. Is it doing something else? Well, the simple-minded thing is it's clogging off the arteries to your brain. You're getting less oxygen. Sure. True enough. But it does more than that. The brain cells put out a compound called beta amyloid. If you could look at a brain cell, it's like a sausage maker. These little strands of sausage are coming out. That's beta amyloid. It forms little clumps.
Called plaques.
Called plaques. Yeah. Microscopic meatballs in between the brain cells. And that is the primary hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. Well, if you have a fatty diet, especially the animal fat, if you run a high cholesterol level, the brain puts out more of that, and you have more plaque in your brain. So the answer is, don't be eating these animal products, not just for your heart,
right,
but to protect your brain.
Right. That's quite remarkable. Is there a genetic association? I mean, they have identified a gene that seems to predispose people to Alzheimer's. Does that make them more vulnerable to diet, or is that independent of diet?
What you said is exactly it. It's called the ApoE epsilon 4 allele. If you got it from mom, you've got 3 times the risk of Alzheimer's. If you got it from mom and dad, 10 to 15 times the risk. But what the gene does is it makes a protein that goes around in your bloodstream carrying cholesterol from place to place. It does the same in your brain. So if you're not eating cholesterol, and you're not eating the saturated fat that causes your body to make cholesterol, the theory is that that gene will hopefully be left with not much to do. So in other words, there are genes that are like dictators, the genes that say blue eyes or brown hair. You can't argue with them. They give orders. But the genes for Alzheimer's disease are committees. They make suggestions, and you can fight with them. In the same way, there are genes for diabetes. Yeah. But genes are not destiny. You can say, I don't think I want to get diabetes. And if you don't eat the way your parents ate, and if you don't open your mom's recipe file too often, you eat in a healthier way, suddenly what runs in families may not affect you.
Remarkable. Let's take this to heart disease if we can. In fact, let's do it right after the break. All right. More Conversations with Great Minds with Dr. Neal Barnard right after this break. Welcome back to Conversations with Great Minds with Dr. Neal Barnard. He has been a principal investigator and co-investigator in many clinical trials investigating the effects of diet on health, including one study that looks at the effects of dietary interventions in type 2 diabetes patients. He's the author of several books, including Dr. Neal Barnard's Program for Reversing Diabetes, the scientifically proven system for reversing diabetes without drugs, and the 21-day weight loss kickstart, and breaking the food seduction. Let's get back to it. I've seen this in my own family. With regard to diet and disease, my brother-in-law had a heart attack a year or so ago. Had triple bypass surgery, or quadruple or whatever, some massive bypass, and went on a total vegan diet, and lost a bunch of weight, and now his doctors are totally freaked out because he doesn't need any of the medication that they have to offer. I mean, he's literally not taking any of them, and it's not because he's being, a refractory patient. It's because he no longer needs them. I mean, according to their own analysis of his blood.
He's getting to the cause of the disease.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently that's the same story that happened to Bill Clinton.
Exactly.
So how does this diet that cures or prevents diabetes also cure or prevent heart disease? And can it even reverse heart disease?
It can clearly reverse heart disease. Now, when I was in medical school, this was unheard of. Heart disease was progressive, just like diabetes, a one-way street. And the idea was, yes, you'll need a bypass sooner or later, but that doesn't last forever. You'll need a repeat bypass, and eventually you'll die of it. But it was 1990, we're talking 2 decades ago, that Dr. Dean Ornish said, well, wait a minute. What if we use a plant-based diet? There's effectively no cholesterol in the diet anymore. And there's no animal fat to drive that cholesterol machinery in your blood, because those particles of cholesterol irritate the artery walls. And they cause the arteries to gradually narrow, choking off the supply of blood, whether it's to your brain or to your heart.
So it's an inflammatory process.
Yes, it's an inflammatory process. And so this very simple approach of don't eat the animal products, keep the oils low, and don't smoke, be physically active, simple things. When Dr. Ornish did angiograms in the patients, which shows this little trickle of blood getting through the heart, the arteries were opening up. No surgery, no roto-rooter, nothing. The arteries were opening up on their own. And I called Dr. Ornish. I said, you know, I had never met him. I said, every doctor in America will believe this works. But what they will say is, nobody could follow that diet. It's too extreme. So he said, come on out, let's do a study. And I interviewed all of his patients. And what we discovered is they were thrilled. They were delighted. First of all, they could eat spaghetti and all kinds of foods they enjoyed. They just set aside the animal products. But they lost weight. And their arteries were opening up again. Their energy was back. They didn't need all the pills. They didn't have the side effects and the expense. In the same way that President Clinton has said, yeah, I reversed my heart disease, but look at me. I'm 25 pounds thinner. He looks better than he has in a long period of time.
Yeah. So this is reversible. There's one of the contras to this take cholesterol out of your diet is that the body produces cholesterol.
Yes. Are
you suggesting that or is this correct that the body produces cholesterol in response to inflammation, and that external eaten cholesterol produces the inflammation that causes the body to produce its own cholesterol that then narrows the artery? Is that the mechanism, or some variation on that?
Let me give a real simple-minded view of it, which is the liver makes cholesterol, right, and other body tissues do as well, because you need a little bit of cholesterol to make certain hormones. Testosterone and estrogen are actually made from cholesterol. It's also the glue that holds our cell membranes together. So if you didn't have any cholesterol, you would dissolve into a heap of jelly. You need a bit of it. But your liver makes that trace that you need. So if you're eating animal products, you're getting their cholesterol added to your own. Right. And if you eat the animal fat, that stimulates your cholesterol-making machinery. So it's just you're getting too much traffic in the blood of all these cholesterol particles that you just don't need and are better off without.
So the cow eats the grass, and the cow's liver makes its own cholesterol for the cow, and then you eat the cow,
or the fish, or the chicken, or any of the animals.
Yeah. Any animal product at all.
Right.
And what are your thoughts on eggs?
Same story. If when a chicken lays an egg, everything that makes a chick is in that egg. Everything to make feathers and a beak and feet and skin and a liver and a spleen, it's all in there. The egg does not order out for room service.
Right.
So packed in that egg is more cholesterol than an 8-ounce steak, a huge amount of fat, and so forth. And it's not something that we should really be eating, because it really is a time bomb of cholesterol.
So, which increases your risk both of heart disease and diabetes.
Yeah, yes, it does.
What about cancer? How does cancer fit into all of this?
Cancer, if you look at cancer rates, people have thought, well, how much is genetic and how much is something else? Well, genes are not really changing over time, but cancer rates have been changing quite dramatically. And in the earlier part of the last century, breast cancer was shooting up as our meat and intake was going up, and our fat intake and our calorie content in general was going up as our waistlines were expanding. So if we reverse those things, cancer rates will fall. What's the connection? It's not cholesterol. It's the fact that our diet changes our hormones. Diet can affect the hormones in a woman's body. It can drive estrogen. It can increase estrogen levels. And in a man, it can increase testosterone. It doesn't make you more macho. What it will do is increase prostate cancer risk in a man, or breast cancer risk in a woman. And a plant-based diet helps the body to have an adequate amount of estrogen, but not the excesses, and the same with testosterone.
Right. Food addiction. Our director, Kevin, is famously addicted to giant Slurpee drinks. Sorry, Kevin. What happens?
He is not alone.
Yeah.
So what everybody else here in the studio is too.
What happens when people have an addiction to a particular food? What is that a sign of of something? Is it a bad thing, a good thing? Is it that your body craves it because it needs it, or is it your body craving it because
it is not that you need it. People have rationalized this. I have to have chocolate because I'm magnesium deficient. I say nonsense. If I take a chocolate binger, I mean a person who just is shoveling chocolate in. There's a drug called naloxone. We give it to people who have overdosed with heroin. Right. A man's passed out on the street. He's going to die of heroin overdose. I put naloxone in his bloodstream. It goes to the brain and it attaches to opiate receptors, right, and the heroin can't work. If I give it to a chocolate addict, if I can use that word, I can give them a tray of chocolate. They take a bite and they just set it back down. They've lost interest in it.
Is that the theobromines in the chocolate, or is there some kind of...
Great question. The theobromines are stimulants, right, but this is something else. This is an opiate effect that probably comes as soon as the chocolate touches your tongue. Opiates are released in the brain, the endorphins probably, and that triggers it. And there are certain foods that just hijack that system more than anything else. Sugar will do it, chocolate will do it, cheese does it to a degree, meat will do it, but you know, nobody ever went to the 7-Eleven at 9 o'clock at night to buy cauliflower. I mean, because that food, people think, well, it's okay, or an orange or an apple or whatever. They don't have that drug effect.
Yeah.
This would all be fine, except for the fact that cheese is 70% fat, and chocolate is fatty too. Right. And sugar has calories we don't need. So those even modest addictions cause us to get a little bit off track, unfortunately.
Tell me about our PCRM.org.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. When I finished my residency here back in 1985, I decided I really wanted to have doctors to have tools for helping patients to change. And one of the products that we've developed, or programs I should say, is called the Kickstart. Totally free, doesn't cost anything, but at PCRM.org, you sign up, and then we'll send you an email every day with recipes and little cooking videos and how you can change your diet. And my hope is that a woman who's sitting on the couch and she's using this program will get her reluctant spouse to do it with her, because they both need help. And it's a fun thing. What we encourage people to do is to try a plant-based diet, but because that sounds like a tall order, do it for 3 weeks. You can do anything for 3 weeks, and I have celebrities like Alicia Silverstone and Kathy Freston and various athletes who pump you up and make you feel good about that. So that's the Kickstart. It's at PCRM.org. Doesn't cost a thing.
Yeah, and this is basically you no longer need a physician, or at least you're not going to need one for these. You're diminishing your probability of need for these things. Is the old saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away true?
It's partly true, as long as people have apples and green vegetables and whole grains and beans and the whole.
And might that be meta? Might that be part of our collective experience of a plant-based diet as a healthy thing? Nobody ever said a steak a day keeps it up.
It does the opposite. By the way, I don't think people should fire their doctor, particularly if a person has diabetes or has high blood pressure. It takes time for you to need to be able to reduce your medications, and so the doctor can work with you to keep you out of trouble as the diet is improving.
Right. To what extent, if people go on different diets to lose weight, if somebody goes on a diet to lose weight, it was Dr. Atkins, wasn't it? He was like this high-fat diet. Go on this high-fat diet and lose weight because you'll... What are your thoughts on that? It seems totally crazy given what you've been saying.
Well, I think it was a serious mistake. His theory was if you don't eat any carbohydrate, you'll lose weight. And that's true. But the reason is not that there's anything bad about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates like rice and potatoes, I mean, that's half of what we eat. These are the healthiest foods. But what happened is about half of what we eat are carbohydrates. So if you take half of your food out and you're not eating it, you'll lose weight. Right. The mistake he made was leaving in the meats and the dairy products that lead to heart disease. And when he died, and people talked about the fact that he himself had heart disease, many people started looking askance at that kind of dietary approach. If a person comes in to me and they have a weight problem, I do not say count calories and go hungry. What I'll say is eat vegetables and fruits and whole grains and beans and all the things that turns into, whether it's oatmeal with cinnamon and raisins or a bean chili or whatever it might be. And don't worry about counting calories, because they'll take care of themselves. The fiber will fill you up. The low-fat content will cause your waistline to start slimming. And the healthiest people I see are the people who just stick with it.
And stop using oils? No more olive oil?
Well, if you're out at an Italian restaurant, I don't think you need to blot your noodles exactly. Right. But I would keep it modest. Olive oil, it beats the socks off chicken fat, but you don't want to go crazy with it.
And it sounds like eating in restaurants. We have about a half a minute left. It seems like eating in restaurants could be suicidal.
No, you can do it. Italian places, the chef will love to bring you angel hair pasta with chunky tomatoes and wild mushrooms. A Chinese restaurant, many, many choices. Extra points for Japanese. They'll make you veggie sushi and miso soup. Mexican, beans and rice. You can do it. Even the steakhouse has terrific vegetables.
Remarkable. Dr. Barnard, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And for spreading the great word. Dr. Neal Barnard. To see this and other conversations with great minds, go to our website at conversationswithgreatminds.com.